And Julie Gottschall has graciously accepted the role of Secretary Pro Tem for the evening, so if you please take the role, I would appreciate it.
Susan Ryder. Here. Philip Hood, absent. Mark Berry.
Present.
Leanne Charlotte, absent. Julie Gottschall, present. Richard Haig.
Present.
John Rose.
Present.
Great, so we have 5 and we have a quorum, so we can begin. So if everybody join me standing and say the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are going to begin with public comment, and I have before me a request to address the board from Mrs. Janice Snubridge.
Hi. My name's Janice Schnelker, and I've lived in the village for 56 years ago, and my parents were really poor, so I kind of know I want to thank all of you for serving, because I know most of you pretty well, and some of you I've met, a couple times, so thank you very much. There's one of the things that we treated me very hard, when the concept first came up, I talked to the director of the library, and I told him about the awful history behind it, and it was kind of shrugged off. So I kept records for 2 years, and poor Kevin got stuck with me for a couple of years, and because I learned how to foil a long time ago, and so that I had to do that. But anyhow, so you have all the data. I won't go through with it, but I'll just hit up some key points. And one of them, the main one, is that right after the 1996 advisory referendum, where Norwood was trying to annex to the village, I was very active in the procuring signatures for to go on the referendum for the village, and the league was involved in that, and so I was involved through the league. But it was such, how can I say this? It was not a nice situation that presented itself, and so there was a very ill feeling that prevailed with the village, and somebody from the village on the village board and so forth, etc., found out that the library had been giving free library cards to children in the unincorporated areas. So this was about maybe 97. And so the rug was pulled out because the village is actually the treasurer, ends up to be the treasurer for the public library, okay? And they kind of have the say all there, even though it's a separate taxing unit, okay? And it was pulled out in about 1999, two gals whom I know and like very much, and they're both league members, came to the village and asked if they could get together and go for a special service area district for the library. And so they stated that this could be done, and then they gave them kind of a year to get this thing together, so that they could get enough signatures, which you need 51% out in the unincorporated area west of us, because we have 4 unincorporated areas, by the way, within District 65. But the one out west was the one that was applying for this. And in the end, it never came up. They could never even get it off the ground to get the signatures for this. So it was stated that, all right, we couldn't do this anymore, and we're not going to bother with this getting the free, no library cards. So they had a thing whereby they could come, you could register for a library card if you were an out-of-towner, so to speak, from the village, because the village is the only coterminous thing with the library, that you could then pay the equal property tax value, and then the cost for the library, and they had sheets, they got it from the assessor's office, and they had sheets that they could pay their bill, okay? And somebody found out that if they went to North Chicago, they could get one for $50, and they didn't have to pay the real pay. And that was not because the librarian was not a good person, because she's neat. In fact, she happens to be a friend of mine. Her name's Joan Bailey. And she really runs a tight ship, but it was sloppiness among the employees. And so they found out about it. I guess 56 people escaped our property tax. Ended up getting like free library cards for $50 a year up in North Chicago.
Jan?
And that's what's
Jan, can we maybe just fast forward to the present? Because as you know, John and I were both on the library board, and this issue was discussed extensively at that time.
You want me to move on?
Yeah,
Well,
what-
I do, but I guess more particularly, we've discussed this issue as a board. In fact, it was on our last
Okay.
agenda. And, we discussed, and I think where you're going with this, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, is that there's sort of a free rider problem, right? That people have the
Yeah,
opportunity to buy the cards, and we're letting them, these families, these
Right.
children, get them without paying.
So 2 years ago, in 2015, the library said, okay, their circulation is way down, because libraries.
That's not true.
Huh?
That's not true. The circulation wasn't down in 2015. Circulation has been up every single year.
No, with the children, the village is gone from the time I was in it, when I came. The village was under 3,000. The village is now pretty close to 6,000. So it would be, but the circulation for children's circulation.
Is your concern though the $1,000?
No, my concern is that if it is a taxing district, and if you're going to go through with this program, then it should come from the schools. Okay, the school should be the agent whereby then they contract the library, because all children are in the schools. My problem with this is that you're not really hitting. You're saying the thing you're saying, or in the goals of this thing, was that we would give the children that equal opportunity with those in like Buck. Is really what the goal is. And it's not really happening. What is happening is a circulation. You're getting more circulation than in the children's thing, but you're not really getting to the kids. You're not really getting to that 9.6% of kids, I think, that the library was hoping to hit, because those children, many of those children do not have access to transportation as freely as some of the other children. And I'm looking into that now, and it's hairy. My concern is that I would like to see all children involved. If you're going to do it, should be done right. And all children need to be involved. And the only way that all children can be involved is if the school initiates them and then contracts the library to do it.
Where are the children not involved now?
You're not, what has happened is that they have gone to the schools and told the kids that they could get library cards, so they have been listened. They're only getting at the rate, and I have the data here, but I don't want to look at it. You're only getting about 2/3 of the kids from the unincorporated areas that have actually applied for the cards. So you're missing several kids at the high school level, Seaforth, but that's not our problem here. I don't care about the $1,000. I really don't. I really think that it needs to come from the school, so that the library can come into the school, and that the school then directs it, even through their summer programs and through directs the reading program, because it is a recreational library. The Lake Bluff Library is a recreational library. It is not a research library. Further, I think that it can be extended. If it works through the school, it can be extended into libraries, such as, particularly at the middle school, the upper elementary and the middle school level, it can be extended, your kids get used to the concept library in terms of research library, college library, and you have all this available.
Have you heard from any parents?
Huh?
Have you heard from any parents that are unhappy with the existing situation?
With parents?
Any parents or any children? You claim that there are a number of children that don't have access to this program.
They don't,
Have you heard from any of those parents or any of those
I've heard
children?
from parents who are saying, I've heard from parents that are saying that, and particularly at the preschool level, which is interesting, that where I think they really need the library, that they can't get access for their kids, to the library. And when they really need it, and they don't have the money to pay the tax, pay that tax for the library. I've heard from them. I've heard from people that say, no more taxes, they don't want to pay the taxes. I've heard that directly.
Well, the tax, if you think about it for a minute, we have 2,000 taxing families in this district, okay? We're spending $1,000.
No, I'm
It's
not.
50 cents a family, that's 4 cents a month. So it's a tax issue. I mean, I'm willing to put forth 4 cents a month to allow these kids to have access to the library. So that shouldn't be an issue at all. I'm more concerned with your comment because Eric contradicts it actually in his response to you, that fewer and fewer kids have access. I'm trying to grapple with the same thing that
I got the access from FOIA. I FOIA'd at the same time each year. Okay, and I FOIA'd in April each year. And when I went in to talk to Eric, because before I do anything like this, I always talk to the people involved that did the proposal. And then Eric said, well, then we have all these summer kids, coming. Okay, and that's fine. I think the schools should also be engaged in the summer program. Okay, and if they were, then all kids would come. But they didn't get those kids until after the FOIA.
But his letter to us indicates that 84% of the kids, as of August, were enrolled in the program. That's a pretty substantial number.
Yeah, but there's 16% that are not.
Do you know how many Lake Bluff kids don't have library cards? Because I can imagine there's probably kids in Lake Bluff School.
But no,
district that
this
don't
program was only for the unincorporated.
Right, I understand, but I'm saying that of the Lake Bluff Village children, not all of them have made their way to the library to get a card just because they live in the village.
Well, and because it's so easy to get information
Elsewhere.
In other words, the library has changed substantially in just the last 17 years. I mean, hugely. The schools have remarkable libraries. They allow kids instruments, computers, and this thing. It has become a computerized thing. When I was working on my last degree, I went to the library, and at that time, the internet had just come into being.
Hey, so Janice, we're going to have to
Okay.
move on a little bit, but if just in summary, your recommendation is that the district contract to the library, bring the library
That is
to
correct. And I would also like to see some contracting even with the kids, or you wouldn't even need a contract. Relationship with Lake Forest Library, Lake Forest College Library for the kids. And I would also like to see some contract through the schools it wouldn't be a contract, but a relationship with the medical school library, which is fabulous for the kids that are engaged in science, and I think it could be done. And further, which I didn't put in my thing, I would like to see some kind of arrangement made that the preschool children who are in the district be able to get some kind of access to the library, because many of those cannot afford to buy books, and it would be a benefit to the school. If the school ran it, it could then be a benefit to all children. Okay, thank you.
So I appreciate you coming in and talking to us and doing all that research. So we will take under consideration everything you're suggesting. All right, thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 5. And-
I have an update for that.
Okay.
To that.
And we're gonna offer the board the opportunity to request an additional agenda item for the future, or if there's a discussion item people need to bring up for this evening. I know Julie wanted to mention something and Dr. Sophie wanted to mention something.
I just wanted to provide an update and kind of a preview of what you're going to hear about in 2 weeks. As I shared in my board update, it's not really good news. Our start at the elementary school involved problems once again with one of the 5 air conditioning units in our 9-year-old building. It has been a problem for several years, going on and off. Jay has been working with Steve Miller. We are now at a point, one of these 5 units, we either need to spend close to $200,000 for repairing and a little bit over $200,000 for replacing. And that's 1 out of 5 units, which I think is atrocious. Jay is handling it. He is met with Train as well as White Architects and is working through that. We're hoping for a better price. Just so you know, something I found interesting that I've shared with the teachers is the coil that went out is actually, and I'm going to use my language, Jay, you're a lot more professional with it, but it's kind of like up in an eave at the top of the building. So in order to get to it, a crane has to come out and pull out that part of the eave to get to the coil. It's not an easy repair and replace. And of course, that's money we did not have budgeted, which when Jay talks a little bit about the budget, the final budget approval will have some dollar amounts in that particular line item. But it probably is going to make more sense for us to replace it, and then we're going to have a plan for replacing the other 4 as they go out also. Warranty, I know the company's gone out of business.
5-year warranty, 5 years.
And the company's out of business,
The
correct?
company that made the coil is out of business, but the train system itself is warranted for 5 years.
But that's not all. The same week we had our first water heater, which the building was designed with the water heaters over the wiring room for the internet and all of that. That burst into classrooms both on the top and bottom levels and totally ruined teaching materials for one of our teachers who, it turns out, I talked to her today, her mom was a teacher and she had all of her mom's materials with her name in it, and they're all totaled. So we had fast repair with that. The water heaters themselves are about $30,000 to replace total. Of course, after the one went out, the other one went out shortly after. So that's gone. And then on top of that, when the water did pour into the wiring room, which is now fixed, we were without internet for the second week of school. That was about a $50,000 cost to get that fixed.
Yes.
So they say things come in 3s, and that would be our 3 for the next 3 years, correct?
It was the security camera, the brand new security camera system, and then some power supplies and all the servers for the wiring.
So there will be more to talk about at the next meeting, but I wanted to give you an update. As you know, we shared that at our strategic planning meeting, and the elementary school obviously is aware of what's going on.
We have insurance to cover any of this?
The insurance will cover the replacement of the electronics and teaching materials from the water heater failure.
The $30,000 is our
To
expense.
replace the water heaters is on us, but the damage caused by the fact that they leaked all of we can get an insurance.
So a small piece of it. But the coil, the AC and the coil, that's on us.
Right.
Yep.
And have we looked at, I'm sure you guys have you looked again into any recourse we might have against previous engineers, architects, contractors?
I was told unofficially that we would not have any, but I actually, that's on my to-do list of things to call. I wanted to have a better idea on what the cost was going to be before I called. So.
Can we access fund balance? I mean, that's part of the purpose of fund
Yes,
balance.
absolutely.
We can do that
Mm-hmm. I'm
if we desire.
talking to our auditors to see whether or not this can be considered just a capital equipment purchase versus a repair. Because if we can pay for it out of the capital project fund, it doesn't impact our operating numbers, it's just straight fund balance.
So there's more.
Uh-oh, can the floor operate without the fifth?
Yeah, they each cool a different part of the building. So
Ah.
the other floor up, it's just one corner of the building.
I
is
see.
more
Which is
warm.
very warm and stuffy. Now, fortunately, because we thought enough to order the weather ahead of time, we've had okay weather, but if it were to get hot, which I know Friday it's supposed to actually hit 82, my guess is the afternoon will be a little stuffy up in that corner.
Yeah. We have
So-
cool evenings, and Steve is bringing in lots of outside air overnight to start the day cool, and hopefully by 3 o'clock it's not too uncomfortable.
Needs to be taken care of by next spring. And that concludes my
So we
report.
will get more updates.
More updates as they come.
Okay. Julie, did you have something you wanted to mention?
I did. I just wanted to add a discussion item or a presentation item for a future meeting, and this has come up in the context of the strategic planning. And that would be, I'd like to understand what would be involved with a merger between 115 and 67. What, if it's possible, what benefit it may bring, what detriment it may
115
bring.
and
Yeah,
us.
all three. Or, however it could break down. I don't know. That's what I'd like to understand. But just some context for increased opportunity, either a merger, increased shared services. I think it's a good time to start that conversation where we are right now, just to understand what's involved.
I think it's a good conversation to have publicly, but we may have to give Jean and staff some guidance on how to allocate her time, given the work she's doing on strategic planning and all the other things. 'Cause
And other
that seems like it may be a bit of a hefty presentation to put together. So maybe you guys can think a little bit about time required to do such a thing and talk to us about it the next time we meet. We can give some advice on
I think
how to prioritize and
what I can start with is I have a notebook. When I had some free time, I think 4 years ago, I started putting articles together on consolidation, so I can start sending you some basics, because there's some general information that you need to have in mind before we get started on specifics.
Good.
I wonder if there's any other school districts that have done something similar. Like a case study would be interesting to me.
I
Has
have one
anybody-
of those from the state.
Yeah, that would
We
be
also have to
interesting.
hear from Lake Forest, is what they say.
Right.
oh, yeah.
Maybe they've looked into it.
No
I
small-
doubt it. I think
no
we
small
probably have to be the driver of
ask.
that.
I can give you basic facts. I can give you a case study because there has been consolidation.
And that sounds like that's like a referendum kind of like.
It is a referendum.
Yeah.
It's a referendum
big
and
deal.
people have to vote yes on both sides. But there's a lot involved, and I think it's important to know the specifics. As I shared before, and it may even have been the board before this board, my last district, I was in a small district also. And that board's, the first priority was not to consolidate. And at that time, they were having public comments to legislators, and I was involved in that. So I did keep a lot of the materials that I have, and I will be happy to share that.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll start very high level when
Right.
we get a chance.
All right, thanks. Anybody else? All right, so we're gonna move on to discussion items. Item A is the 17-18 budget discussion. Jay's gonna walk us through that, I think, for the third or fourth time. We
He's
also-
not even gonna walk through, he's just gonna give general overview.
Oh, changes.
Right. Well, he hasn't made any changes yet, he's gonna have to now that the
So we will be approving this budget at our final September meeting.
Yes, so the budget that is, I have not made any changes since the last time that we spoke about the budget. I've displayed it up here again, in case there's any questions you want to go through anything. Will say that I do anticipate, or I do expect to make some changes between now and the final approval, based on two things. One, we've since gotten some certainty from the state for the new funding reform bill and the budget that was passed. So I know how much state money I'm going to get next year. I had a very conservative estimate in here because at the time this budget was made, anything could have happened. So I'll actually be adding about $180,000 of state money to the budget
In 17-18 or 18-19?
in 17-18
Just enough to pay for the air
I was just
conditioning.
gonna say,
and I will be adding the expenses for the air conditioning and things like that. So those are the two changes that I will be bringing back, and we will go through those in detail, or we'll go through the whole budget in detail again at the budget hearing prior to the board meeting before it's passed.
6:45 in front of the next meeting.
6:45.
So really, he just wanted to know if there were any questions. You know, I'm gonna take this opportunity to tell you, I think you did a great job at strategic planning last night,
Me too.
going
Yeah,
through a lot
that
of
was
material.
Yeah.
More people than me understood you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Jay. Okay, now Dr. Rubenstein is going to take us through the sixth-day enrollment report.
You have in your board packet the six-day enrollment report for this school year. We are slightly down. We are slightly down when compared to last year by about 1.8%. However, since 2013, we are up around 6.5% overall. And so it is, if you look sort of diagonally, the only class where it is smaller this year is the first grade going into second grade. Every other class is larger, with the exception of our 8th graders who just graduated and our incoming kindergarten class. So that's where we get the slight drop in enrollment. We still have 60 new students in the district overall. And that does not include the pre-kindergartners or the kindergartners. So these numbers are the ones that are reported to the Regional Office of Education and then to the state. And then on the second and third page are the actual class sizes as taken on September 5th. So you can see how those range.
Not a lot of difference from when you went over that with us in August either.
Kevin, anything about these numbers that surprise you in any way, or is this all in the ordinary course?
So the kindergarten class is a little bit smaller than we were expecting, and 73 is certainly smaller, but nothing I wouldn't say to be terribly alarmed about, especially since we gain students as they grow older and throughout the years. So that was the only thing that was kind of surprising to me. We were all expecting a little bit of a bigger kindergarten class. So it's 12 smaller than average. So
We have a question over here.
okay, hopefully I can answer.
My recollection is that we often see the classes get larger as kids go into the middle school. So my freshman in first grade, he was with a class of 80 kids, and then maybe by 5th grade it was 95 that they just graduated with 113.
Right.
So it seemed like in the middle school years they picked up a lot of momentum. Is that typical?
That is.
Yeah.
So if you, and we have sort of done the study, this class that just left 5th grade, that is our current 6th grade class, though they're starting right now at 100 students, they left elementary school with, I think, 87, so, or maybe 90. So it grows fairly typically, and that is typical to see.
The kids, they come from like Montessori or something into the middle school, or
No, other students move in from other districts, and that's just the appropriate time before they get to high school. And so, they want to
That's a major
have a group of
break.
friends and that sort of thing before they get to high school.
Interesting, you probably know this, we were almost to 1,200 students roughly 10 years ago. Somehow either the population is aging in Lake Bluff and we have fewer families with younger children. I guess
One
that's
of-
the case.
Right,
before
that was one of the
the
things we
economic
talked
crisis.
about last evening, and so it was interesting for me to know, and this may have been a little bit exaggerated, but probably not too much, that the average home value probably on the east side of town has increased significantly. We had a member in our group last night who was talking about in the late 90s you could get a home on the east side of town for $200,000 or $300,000. That was his impression. And those homes no longer are existing. And
He wasn't talking about anything special.
as our median home value has increased across the country, and it's priced a young family just out of college, starting a family, those sorts of things. out of the market to some extent. So
That's an interesting
it's
thought.
one of the pieces there. The other piece is that there were some other sort of employee benefits that were provided in the late 90s and early 2000s related to allowing your student to come to school if you were an employee that's no longer legal.
Do
So
we,
that sort of inflated the.
Yeah, they used to have that policy.
Yep.
do we have any studies on what the preschool population is?
So we do talk with our preschools
I
fairly.
mean, before preschool, I mean like
Absolutely.
0 through 4.
Right. Yeah. So the best way to do that would be to look at like the birth rates and that sort of thing. Unfortunately, because our population is so small, it's hard to pinpoint. So like so for example, our students who come to our school come from like 12 or 13 different preschools that are in our kindergarten class right now. So they came from Lake Bluff Park District. They came to, they came from a Montessori school. They came from a
Church
But there's no demographic thing, in Lake Bluff, we've got, 57 kids to 0 to 1 and
we can absolutely
88
right.
from 1 to 2 and
Yep.
97 from 2 to 3. Or
We can absolutely do that. It's not an exact science in my
It's not.
within my purview. There are
Because we're so
probably
small.
demographers and those sorts of things that could more accurately predict those sorts of things. But
I think you've been able to
Not the
predict it a
demographer,
lot
yeah.
closer than the demographer we used.
Yeah, we had
Prior
somebody
to
years
getting
ago
here.
and it was not all that accurate.
Okay. We don't have that data.
Anybody have any additional questions on the student enrollment?
Nope.
I think, Mark, as you move into the mission statement and our strategic plan work, especially because all of us were out last night, if we could maybe get through the mission statement tonight, that would be a good goal.
So let's move on to our strategic plan discussion. You guys have in your packet some information that
Should have been out at your tables tonight.
Dr. Sophie put together, and Julie so graciously took a stab at providing an attempt at some of this, some information on what makes a good mission statement. And so then, unfortunately, very late in the game, I rearranged a little bit of what Julie put together just so I could make sense of it, trying to match some of her new statement. This is a piece of paper you guys have in front of you.
It was at your desk, so it
I
was
took-
hot off the press. after
Under
working
guiding
on it today.
principles, for example, I took all of Julie's and matched them as best I
What I've
could
heard.
to the original one so that I can kind of compare one of them. But if we're going to start and focus on the mission statement, we have several suggestions from Julie. I tweaked the original one a little bit, and I don't know if anybody has any other thoughts on it.
So the original, why don't we read through the original? The
Original
is-
predates this strategic plan, though, right? What we're calling the original is not in this.
It was what it was when you did that one.
Yes.
And
Mhm. Yes.
superseded it with the current
So
one.
4 years
Exactly.
ago. So that mission statement reads, the mission of Lake Bluff School District 65, working in partnership with the community, is to educate our students to become lifelong learners and well-rounded citizens by addressing the unique needs of students and challenging their potential through excellence in teaching in a safe, nurturing learning environment. That's not in the current strategic plan.
No.
Currently, in the strategic plan, the mission statement is, let's make sure we read it here so I don't butcher what, because I tweaked it a little bit.
Here, it's right here. It is
Provide
on
a
page-
premier educational foundation that enables each student to thrive.
Exactly.
Yeah. If I recall, Susan, I'm sure you can help me, and Jean too, the way we came, the initial cut at mission, vision, and guiding principles came from ECRA, right?
Mhm.
They took themes that they got from survey data and community feedback and tried to cluster them into themes and guiding vision to give us the mission, vision, and original stab at principles, and then the board, in a somewhat arduous process, went back and forth and debated and tweaked and moved things around and came up with the current set of mission and vision.
So I would like to speak to this for a minute. To me, when you think about what the mission is, it really ought to speak to why we have free public education, because that's our mission, right? And to me, the core concept, which is lost in the current statement, is that we are trying to raise responsible, productive citizens. That's fundamentally why we have what we have. I think we've gotten, sort of enamored of these lofty sentiments that where everyone's got to excel and thrive and realize their dreams and everything. That's really not what this is about. It's a great byproduct of what we're all about. But fundamentally, what we are here to do is to give people an education that will prepare them for good citizenship. So I wanted to capture that in the alternatives that I proposed. My personal favorite is the first one. To provide, I use Premier because that's what we had, but maybe to provide an outstanding education that inspires academic achievement, personal growth, and responsible citizenship, because I think that's a big, somewhat broader statement. We're trying to do all of those things, but I would like to get away from this statement that in my mind doesn't really say anything. I don't know what an educational foundation is. I don't know what it means for each student to thrive, and really get back to stating what it is that we should be doing as a school district.
And how would you define a premier education?
Well, that's a good question too. I think that's what we're doing. We can say outstanding. We can just say to provide an education. I don't feel too strongly about any of those.
That's why I like the third one the best, because it took out the word premier, because nobody really liked the word thrive. It took out the word premier. I like the last one.
Okay, I like that one too.
I like the last one as well, and I would change them. I'm not going to wordsmith Julie or Susan, but I would use the word motivate instead of inspire, but that's only a personal thing. That motivate,
I like that too.
or to motivate academic
I
achievement.
love the word inspire.
I like the word inspire.
It's a personal preference.
I'm going to be a little bit of a devil's advocate, and I worry a little bit about, I kind of like some of the loftier statements at the mission statement level, and I worry about being too specific and getting caught up in defining what we're doing, providing quality instruction, learning opportunities, educational environments, and that inspire responsible citizenship. If we're too specific, what if we leave something out that we should have put in? It begs the question of what did we miss, what are we not doing? And a slightly broader statement, I think, gives us a grand vision and something to strive for without pinning us down on specifics in case we miss something or we don't want to do something. The other thing I'm a little concerned about is the references to responsible citizenship, and will that require us to introduce curriculum changes where we address civics?
We do that already.
We do it.
We did.
It's all in mandates.
Can I ask a question? Did anyone at all comment on the mission statement in the existing strategic plan?
Never, not to my knowledge, I never heard it.
No.
Okay, so I mean, we can quibble and argue and
Yeah,
put words around as much as.
but I think we have a responsibility to just not blow it off.
Well, I don't think we're doing that. I mean,
Julie, I like your thoughts that you just gave us, and I also like number 3, just because it takes out a general statement of premier education, which a lot of people have a lot of ideas on exactly what that is, and I'm not sure what it is, but I think it's important that we're giving quality instruction. That's what our schools can. That's what we're supposed to do.
I like number 3. I'm hearing some momentum around number 3. I certainly like that one too.
Susan?
I do too. I like all 3 of them better than the current one, but I think 3 is my favorite.
Okay.
Can I ask where we are on I don't want to wordsmith the vision statement, but what is the current?
We're gonna keep our vision. That was one that everybody told me to
So
hold on
tell me
to.
was it the excellence in education, that one?
Yes,
Okay. 'Cause
every
I
child,
read-
every day.
I read in my packet something that made me think that it had been changed, but okay,
No.
good.
Wait, where is it?
It's the excellence in
Excellent
education.
education, enthusiasm for life,
Right.
every day, every student, every day.
Okay, but that's what I had hoped we were talking about keeping.
Let's go with number 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
I think just to kind of cement it, you really, and I think Julie said it, think about what you stand for. And what we stand for, no matter how many strategic plan reports we give, it's all about the instruction. It's about the learning opportunities we give each individual learner, the environment that we do it in. I heard that loud and clear by many people last night. The word inspire is something I think is unique to Lake Bluff because I do see kids inspired. And I take it very seriously. I've shared this very openly, that we have to teach responsible citizenship. So you add all the personal growth, personalized learning, I think that really encompasses what we do here as a school district.
I do recall the conversation we had last time around about including so many specific items that you risk missing one. But I think these are broad enough to capture it. I don't think it's not raising academic test scores. That would be far too specific, right? I think the concepts are big enough to encompass what we're trying to encompass, Mark. But I hear and I recall the concern we discussed last time around. If you list things, then you're no doubt fail to list one.
Yeah.
But I think these concepts are broad. They're broad enough, I think, to encompass everything that we need to encompass.
So number 3, let's do it.
I like number 3.
Do we want to tackle a handful of the
I
guiding
think
principles?
we should get at least one guiding principle done tonight.
So
at least one.
if you turn over the page that I provided, you turn that over, hopefully I did a good job. I tried to match Julie's stabs at these to the original ones. And in some places that was easier than others. So maybe just with the first couple, which were
Easy one.
fairly simple. The original being the guiding principle is the best interest of students must guide every decision. And as an alternate, a proposed alternate is the needs and best interests of the student population should guide our district's decisions and actions.
I want to backtrack for a minute, Mark, and give a little bit of history on this piece. When we had ECRA work with us on this, they took all the feedback we got from all the different groups. We had community, parents, administrators, teachers, board members, and they came up, the guiding principles are the themes that they hear throughout, that are what's meaningful here in Lake Bluff. And I was thinking about this when I was reviewing this again today. I think you have to, this is what I would ask all of you to do. Read each statement, like the first 2. While they both say something, they each have a different feel. And I think as a board, especially an elected board that is elected to represent the interests of everyone in the community, I think you have to make sure that the guiding principles reflect how you feel about your community. That's all I would ask, because some of them say the same thing, but they feel different to me, if that makes any sense.
A good example of that is the second one, I think, because the second one, we identified parents, students, school staff, and the community. And in the second one, we identified stakeholders and users and non-users, which was much more.
Okay, that's a good example.
Yeah, although I do think that I think when you put it the way it's done here, it doesn't capture it as well than if you read each as a standalone total, because I think what may not be captured in the bolded second bullet point is captured throughout if you just read all of my submissions. That being said, I don't love these still, even with what I did with them. I don't like what we had. I'm not particularly happy with what I've done. I thought some of what we had was there were a lot of platitudes. Instead of being a guiding principle, it was just a lot of sort of axiomatic statements that didn't really tell you what you were supposed to be doing or how to operate. So I wanted to get away from that. So I'm wondering if there isn't an opportunity for yet another proposal. Maybe instead of going through each one individually, we talk as a board about sort of where we want to go with this, what we think is the overall approach, and then I'm happy to sit down and wordsmith a little bit more.
Don't you think, as a board, each one of these individual bullet points are key pieces that you want represented in some way? That would be probably the first thing.
Right.
Are these key tenets that you believe should be in principles? That would be one thing.
I definitely believe that about the ones that are originally in this strategic plan.
Okay.
Sure.
So that, can we all agree on that?
Sure.
All right, well, your work is done.
Well, okay. Is that really? Okay.
No, I'm just,
Because I was going to go a little bit, I'm not sure, for example, in the original we've got fine arts are fundamental to an exceptional educational experience. I'm not sure that that's a concept that is equal to the first bullet point, the best interests of students must guide every decision. I think that's a much finer point. So what I did was try to take them and make each one of the bullets sort of proportionate in terms of how important they are. So the fine arts didn't get its own bullet point. It became opportunities for development of the whole child should be promoted through wellness, enrichment, and fine arts. Maybe that's not the perfect statement either, but that would be an example.
Where that came from is the feedback at the last strategic planning. There was a lot of feedback on the importance of fine arts.
Yeah, I get that. I'm sorry.
I like the idea of highlighting some of those individual things because it's what sets our district apart from other districts. It's some of that soft stuff, that not hardcore academics that I think attract people to our school. And by calling it out in our principles, it really makes it an important part of who we are. So
And
that's
like
why
I said,
But then you better make sure you don't miss something. There are other things besides fine arts.
well, I mean, there are separate statements for social and emotional wellness
And
and
sports, as an example, or computer sciences,
Right.
I
or
wouldn't lump those in.
robotics. I mean, there's all kinds of
Right,
stuff. And
right.
if you pick one, then you gotta worry about leaving stuff out.
And especially if you pick one that's like so fine compared to the other big broad concepts we have in here. But I hear both these points, and I think they're both valid considerations.
I don't think of fine arts as a narrow curriculum. It's encompassing several subject matters. You know what I mean? It's band, it's art, it's drama, it's chorus. It's not just one little thing. I think that's fairly broad. And social and emotional wellness is something that is threaded through all our curriculum. Right?
I think that's a key piece of what we stand
Yeah,
for.
so that's
here.
my personal
Social
opinion.
emotional.
Those are things that define our school as we learned from the surveys and the meetings and the feedback we got from parents on that last. Not this go round because we haven't summarized it all yet, but the last time it was pretty loud and clear.
I'm going to have to make a comment, not to sideway here, but you know, from my experience in these first two breakout sessions of the strategic planning, I'm not satisfied that this is the best way to come up with what are truly the guiding overarching principles of the district. You know, you get in a room and there's a number of very intelligent, thoughtful feedback, but also through one lens. And you know, I just don't think that we certainly all of it needs to be considered, but I don't think it puts us on a course that.
What do you mean through one lens?
Well, it was predominantly the comments have been from the users, the current users, and it predominantly around the curriculum, which is very important. But again, we as a board are responsible for so much more than that. And in fact, oftentimes I felt like the conversation's been very dance floor. You know, we want Mandarin now, and we want, you know, improv, and you know, not that's those are all, it's great feedback, but again, we sitting here as a board, that's not the minutia where even we belong, much less, you know, the community necessarily. Again, there are shortcomings in the way that the strategic planning is done, and while I think it's good feedback that needs to be considered, I don't think we say, well, that's the feedback we got from those planning meetings, and therefore it must be our guiding principles. Because I do think there's limitations to the process.
I think that Jean and her staff are going to take that minutia and aggregate it up into broad themes and trends, which we're there to observe the conversation and file it away so that when Jean and Kevin and whoever's working on this process
All of us.
aggregate it up to broad themes and trends, and then we come in and can talk. Maybe we need to wait a little bit before we start talking about guiding principles, before we see what bigger picture items they synthesize all this stuff into. So as we're talking about it, maybe we do need to put off the guiding principle conversation for a little bit to see if anything else pops up that we hadn't been expecting. Because you're right, when we're in there, it's a lot of detail.
Mm-hmm.
But they're going to take all of that together and then group it into, just have this crazy vision of this monster poster board.
There'll be something.
Start grouping things together. And,
You know, I do think though on these guiding principles, I think there's a couple you could even choose tonight that you know are going to be in there. The best interests of students are going to guide your decisions. That's a no-brainer. How you want to word that is up to you. The fiscal discipline, that's got to be in
Right.
there. I mean, there's a couple in there, social emotional, that's huge, not only for our district alone, but it goes right along with curriculum. So there's some things in here that I know you're gonna agree on as a board. Not all of them, man, there will probably be some new ones.
Right. I do think that this, gives a good overview of the basic concepts that need to be in the guiding principles. I agree with that. And they're not tremendously different from what we had before in terms of theme. Again, I get, just to give another example, excellence in teaching promotes excellence in learning. I'm not sure where that takes us. So I tried to put something that was more of a guiding principle than just a platitude. But anyway, this is good feedback already. And yeah.
So does anybody
So,
want to have
I-
an idea how
here's
you want
my
to
vote.
proceed tonight?
I think I would challenge you to come up with 2 guiding principles before we leave tonight that we can all agree on.
So let's start with the two
The
that you
first
said.
one's the
The one about the fiscal discipline and the one about the first one.
Now, you don't have to
The
decide on the words, just
Okay.
decide on the concept.
Okay. Well, that's
Because I think you have to talk about how you're gonna
I'll jump
be.
on the fiscal discipline.
Okay, so that's one. Fiscal discipline, anything else?
What do you mean?
Any other, like, big picture
Well, I
things?
think
We're not,
the
we're
best
not worried
interest
about-
of students
Yeah.
has got to be
Okay,
in
best
there.
interest of students.
You have to. I think all of these really have to be in there. That there is, we need stakeholders. Everybody has some input and some role in our education.
You know what I like too is something about communication, effective and transparent communication. We've kind of
Yeah,
lived
those
by
are
that
three
for the
good
past 4 years, and I think we need to continue with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's keep those 3 for right now, and here's what I'm gonna suggest, and I'm gonna give you an example. And it's based on a small group discussion from my first strategic planning experience. And that is the one with facilities and technologies must enhance the educational process. That particular item may be totally transformed in the next strategic plan. The word facilities and technologies may still be in it, but we may have a whole different guiding principle for this next time, because we're that much further along with technology. So I think if you could pick up the key tenets, one of the big things you're gonna need to do after you're given this somewhat aggregated data is you're gonna need to come back to something like this as a board and say, hey, how do we want this to feel? Because this is a great example of a couple different examples of key points and how they're written, how they feel differently.
Yep.
So that's the board's decision in coming up with a strategic plan.
Mark, you'll correct me if I'm wrong about this, maybe Jean. I seem to recall the guidance for lack of a better term, from ADCRA being that these ought to be short.
Yes.
And that they ought to state principles that did not involve, were not should statements, but more declarative. Not, we should do this, we should do that, but instead we stand for this. You know what I mean?
It's what you stand for. That was one of the things.
And so that's a couple of the things that I noticed about the way that they were drafted the last time, which is that they are pretty short. There's not a lot of ands, or lists. There's, a statement. So something to think about. I'm not just because ADCRA said it doesn't make it so, but I remember that being sort of a guiding rule that we were to be as pithy as possible. That these are one-liners. These are.
I like things that are concise and brief to the point, and these are somewhat elegant, in my opinion.
Yeah.
They're a little lofty, and I'm okay with that.
Well, and you guys are gonna have to make the decision. Something that stood out for me on this is the one Julie actually mentioned, excellence in teaching promotes excellence in learning. I love how that sounds, but when I read the suggestion, I like the suggestion better. Because that to me meant more to me. Now you have to remember who reads a strategic plan. It could be any of your constituents.
Yeah, I do like that one better. I do. I think the other is, excellence is sort of in the eye of the beholder. I think there's something to be gained with the rewording of that one in particular.
So you wanna worry about the feel, you wanna worry about the basic tenets, and really you're gonna have to take 2 at a time. But I do agree with Mark, we may wind up having to do this a little bit more after the next strategic planning session, so you can see what the general themes are, because
I'm curious to see what's different, because there will be some stuff. We noticed some stuff in the meeting last night that was starting to bubble up that I don't know if it came up with other discussions, but be curious. So the potential for new thoughts, new themes may be out there.
I would agree with you on that. I think it was interesting to me because one of the main things I remember from the strategic planning years ago was how much I heard about the lack of communication.
Yeah.
And so when I was putting together my one-page list, I was like, wow, we've really gone far in that goal. But then the question is, I still get from parents, well, we never knew that. Well, we're communicating emails,
So,
Twitter, phone.
It's
How
almost
are we
like
gonna do
it's
that?
too much.
It
at
is.
this
But I
point.
heard a
It's
million
gotta be
communication
like-
elements. In all your summaries, there's stuff about communication that surprises me, that there's still negative perceptions on
Well,
communication.
People don't know what to focus on. I think that
Because there's too much, we're overstimulated.
Well, I think
I don't know.
much of our communication was targeted toward non-users in the past, to bring them into the fold more. And I don't know that it's perhaps accurately giving parents what they want in terms of communication.
Well, then the question is, what do we communicate? One of the things that bothered me most on the end of the year survey, and I think there was only one comment, but I remembered it. You need to be more transparent with your financials. And I'm thinking, how? We have done that. To me, I don't think we could have been any more transparent. So where did we miss somebody? I want to know.
That one guy.
Well, that's the next
Or
session, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna get some good feedback then, and that's gonna be.
so what?
There's transparent and then there's accessible. And I think there's a difference between that. I think we might be eminently transparent and still not getting our message through the way we
Well,
think it's going through.
Based on the feedback on standards-based grading, one would say that wasn't a transparent decision. That was presented as a fait accompli, and I think that may be some of the kind of thing that the parents are expressing concern about.
One thing I picked up last night was some parents want an easy answer to a difficult question. Someone raised in our group, why our expenses have more than doubled in the last 15 years. Well, that's not an easy one to answer. I actually answer it using inflation as an example, because if you compound 3% a year for 15 years, you almost double where you were. But people want easy answers, and it's not easy to get. It's not that simple to provide.
And you
easy
don't get
answers.
your head into it until you've sat on the board and
Right.
thought about these things intensely for.
Well, I know for a fact that John had his head into it before he said it.
There's a few like him out there.
They're also, getting back to what Julie said earlier, there are a lot of people who speak to personal issues. This is what happened to my kid, this is where I went. And I don't understand why that happened. Well, maybe all the other kids it didn't happen to. You can't say that in a meeting, but that came up in our group.
Sure, it always comes up. And you can't write a strategic plan based on that.
No.
Right.
You look at the general themes.
So is there anything you want us to try to
No,
accomplish
you
here?
accomplished it. I give you all gold stars.
No, this is
Feel
good.
like
This
we
is
didn't do
helpful.
much, but
No,
okay.
I think we did, actually.
But you got a lot, because I'm already getting a little bit of feel on where everybody wants to go. And we have a long time to work on this. You're not approving it
That's true.
in May.
That's true. You've got-
So,
Okay.
I think the mission statement we have.
The mission's done.
Tonight
Vision.
is really, really good and far better than either the original or the revised, A or B. So I'm very happy with that. Maybe because I lived it, sort of like the current guiding principles, so I'd rather sort of try to work within that framework but Julie, I do appreciate the concepts, and I think we need to bring the concepts that you've identified and re-look at these in a fresh way. But I guess maybe the one thing that ever convinced me of is the need for
More.
brevity on these guiding principles.
Yep, I agree. Yeah,
Good.
I hit that
no, I'd say you guys did a great job with that.
Yeah.
It helps me a lot.
All right, anybody else? Questions, comments, concerns? So we'll move on to item 7, which is the public comments. If anyone would like to address the board, please do so now. Not seeing a rush to the podium, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn at 8:02 p.m.
So moved.
All in favor?
Hi.
Yeah.
Opposed?
Yeah.
You're opposed?
No.
You said yes. We are adjourned.